I think the park had like $800,000 in revenue. He was getting half of that in the off season. Coming from the multifamily world, you really can't budget for those out of the cash flow of the property. That's what honestly really sucked me into it, to see that, oh wow, this is sort of a budgeter's dream.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Real Estate 101 podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Donley, and with me today is a special guest, Matt Whitermore. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Patrick. Thrilled to be here. Excited for a fun conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I love a good real estate story, and when I read about yours, I read about your thread on Twitter. It wasn't your thread. I forget the guy who actually did it. I was super intrigued, wanted to learn more about you. The RV park story was interesting, really interesting. We'll get into that for sure in depth here shortly. But I think for many of our listeners, they'll find a lot of value in hearing both about your past real estate experience, which you've had a lot of, but also, as I said, we'll do a deep dive into the RV park as well. But first, let's start off how you first got involved in real estate, a little bit about your first steps and what your initial inspiration was to get involved in a career in real estate.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to dive in there. So we're talking back to early 2012 was when I dove into real estate. Actually 2011, I first got my real estate license. I was living in the city of Boston and was an apartment rental agent. So I was still a full-time college student at the time. So it was a great seasonal way to make some money. Didn't enjoy it particularly as a career path, but met a lot of landlords and investors, and that immediately piqued my interest. So ended up getting into acquisitions for a Boston multifamily group that was doing tons of volume. It was still the heyday of foreclosure auctions. So I was studying the properties that were coming up for auction and analyzing those and helping with acquisitions. Did that for 4 years and then pivoted really into the world of finance and worked for the next 5-6 years as a financial analyst doing commercial mortgages before jumping into invest myself, which was in the small multifamily world in upstate New York.
I'm curious about your first deal. I think it was a triplex house hack deal. Is
yes,
that right?
sir. Yep.
I'm curious about that. Just, it sounded like from what I heard, maybe had some challenges for sure. Kind of wanted to hear about like some of those experiences, what it was like, maybe what you would have done differently.
Yeah, a really interesting dynamic to that experience was my fiance and my now wife at the time was involved, and she does not come from a real estate background. So to me, coming from the world of walking through short sales and foreclosures and some really, really hairy real estate in my prior career, this was a clean deal, as far as I was concerned. But to your average citizen, it was hairy. And it was right at the beginning of COVID. And that got delayed because we had an opportunist tenant that was occupying the unit that we were going to occupy as our primary residence. And they held up the closing, refused to get out. The seller had to end up paying them, I think, $12,000 cash for keys to get out. So we closed on it, maybe 6 weeks late. And it was great. We improved the property, renovated some kitchens, some bathrooms, put a new roof on it. Improved it and had good tenants. But it was one of those things where, you don't really know until you try it. It's a very kind of particular thing, and it comes with a lot of challenges to be a live-in landlord. Being a landlord 10 miles away from a property is one thing, but sharing a property with your tenants is a whole nother dynamic, which a lot of people are out there doing it. And, we capitalized on it. I only owned that property for about a year, but pretty much discovered that, that wasn't the path. So many people go from one house hack to the next and build a great portfolio doing that. I discovered that, I wanted to go another route and scale up a little bit more quickly. And that's what I did. I went on to buy about 30 more apartments, ranging from 3 to 9 unit apartment buildings in the next 12, 18 months after that. So that was a great experience to really just push and hit the ground running. I did all off market deals, prospecting direct to seller, direct mail, email, cold calling, all the above, and was able to pretty quickly assemble a little portfolio. So it was fun. It was fun, but always was kind of looking beyond multifamily. What I liked about multifamily is that it's a very plentiful asset. Really, in any market, you can build a list of a few thousand properties and go to town on prospecting. And as a beginner, you obviously want to treat sellers with respect and be deliberate and everything. But if you stub your toe in a negotiation or whatever, there's a few thousand more properties to go chase. Whereas more niche type sectors, there's a much smaller pool of properties. So making a bad impression with the seller because you're inexperienced is a lot more impactful in campgrounds and RV parks, for example.
Sounds like you've done a lot of multifamily. I'm just kind of curious how you ended up pivoting or why you decided to pivot from multifamily. What were the cons or the disadvantages of multifamily that maybe you got tired of, or, why you ended up making that pivot to doing RV parks?
Great question. It was largely a successful endeavor, but it was the what ifs, I'll say, that, were concerning to me, because this was largely during COVID, and it's in New York State, which is notoriously not a landlord-friendly state. So there was this kind of cloud hanging over me in this portfolio that people might stop paying rent. I can't really do anything about it. Albany City, which is where I was based in Albany County, were passing progressively kind of, laws that just didn't make sense, essentially stripping property owners' rights away from them. So always had an eye for scale, and had financed back in my financial analyst days, had assisted in financing a few mobile home parks. So continued with this theme of off-market prospecting and acquisitions. I built my database of mobile home parks, which is different than an RV park and a campground. There's people usually interchange those terms, and they're very different. But anyway, had looked at mobile home parks and built my database, and a very small percentage of those were actually miscategorized. So I had a nice response rate, and a number of those responders said, "Hey, Matt, yeah, I'm a seller, but this is a campground and not a mobile home park. Are you still interested?" And until then, I honestly hadn't considered it. This was 2020. And so I decided, let's go check it out. I'm an open-minded guy. I feel that variety is the spice of life. So I jumped in the car, drove over to Connecticut, checked out some really cool institutional quality and size parks, traveled to the Adirondacks, to Maine, to Massachusetts, to tour all these properties, and learned a ton about the business, saw the operation, saw the books. And after, a few months of that, decided this is what I want to do with, at least the next 5-10 years of my life, and switched and deliberately, moved my prospecting to actually chasing campgrounds versus doing it by accident. So that's, did that, and a year later closed on my first campground.
That's awesome. So I'm curious, did you 1031 out of the multifamily stuff that you had into the RV camp, or no?
No, because I ended up closing on the campground before I was able to exit out of those apartments. So, I paid some taxes on those. It was a calculated decision, but ended up using those funds to double down on that campground, so to speak. And that was a big turnaround project that we jumped into. So needed plenty of funds to clean up the property, renovate facilities, and the like, to bring it up to an acceptable, presentable level.
Somehow you came across a mentor that allowed you to look under the hood a little bit of maybe an RV park that this particular gentleman owned. I'm curious about that experience, how you found him, what was the biggest lesson or takeaway, that he taught you, and also like how important would you say like having a mentor jumping into an entirely new asset class is?
Very important. And I'll use the term mentor loosely for him. I mean, he taught me a ton. Essentially, how that unfolded was a cold email that I sent out, and he responded. And this was the gentleman in Connecticut that had two parks that were very, very high quality, way out of my league at the time. He ended up selling them later on for well over $10 million as a package. And, but, he shared his books. I asked all my stupid questions that a beginner would ask. He answered them all very graciously. And we continued to volley back and forth and negotiate for a little over a year until it fell apart. A broker got involved, and we were about a third less on our offer price than what they ended up selling for. So he made the right move. It was about $5 million that he gained by going with the broker. So I can't fault him for that, but it's really what kind of sucked me into this niche. And it's so interesting. I mean, that I try to use the word campground versus RV park because there is such a wide spectrum of like sub niches within the niche of RV parks. So I'm specifically within the seasonal campground niche, focused in the Northeast, upstate New York and New England for now. It was the cash flow dynamics that he opened my eyes to of the whole seasonal aspect. So that was super interesting to me. We can certainly dive more into that if you're curious.
Yeah, I definitely want to do a deeper dive into all of this. So that first deal, it's in upstate New York. Is that correct?
Yeah, in the Catskill Mountains
What's the difference between a campground versus a mobile home versus a RV park? You kind of said that there's a delineation between the different. So explain that.
I'm a big networker, and I talk to people all over the country that are real estate investors or perhaps looking for a passive type investment. And I discovered early on that I'll have a whole conversation with somebody about a seasonal campground, and they think I'm talking about a mobile home park the whole time. So a mobile home park is really, in my opinion, a misnomer for what it's called. This is a full-time residential property that has either a single wide or a double wide trailer, and that's somebody's permanent primary residence. They call it a mobile home because you can hook it up to a trailer and move it to another mobile home park if you so choose, but that's going to cost you thousands of dollars and likely a special permit to get that unit on the highway to move it. So that creates a very sticky investment model for mobile home park investors. Whereas an RV is a recreational vehicle, usually in my world, not a primary residence. However, that has changed regionally across the country. So now we're getting into RV parks, which is there's various types of RVs. There's Class A, Class B, Class C. That means, drivable, your big rigs that are $250,000. That's more like a tour bus, down to your travel trailer that you hook up to your pickup truck and you tow around to go to campgrounds, all the way down to like a pop-up camper that, is a little trailer that you tow behind and you get to your campsite and you open up the pop-up, and that's just a little bedroom. So very, very wide spectrum. And since I'm in the Northeast, a dynamic here that creates really interesting cash flow is the whole seasonal aspect. Like for my park in New York, I have to go and get an operating permit, a campground operating permit from the New York State Department of Health every year. That only allots me 6 months to operate. And that's because we have harsh winters largely. You'd have to do a lot of creative things to winterize your park to make sure that pipes aren't going to freeze. The RV pipes won't freeze. So you got to like put skirting and insulation around the wheels of the RV. There's very few year-round RV parks in upstate New York, in New England, and in the northern states at large. So over decades and decades, this has evolved into a largely full season renter. So you're open for 6 months, somebody rents from you for 6 months, and they pay that up front before they occupy the site. But that also turns into a very sticky customer. So I have customers at my park that are approaching 20 years at the same campground. That's not their residence. It's their vacation home. It's their summer place. They winterize the RV, shut it down every winter, come back and open it up in May, pay me that next year's fee over the off season. So back to my guy in Connecticut, that's what just kind of really slapped me in the face. He had, I think the park had like $700,000-800,000 in revenue. He was getting half of that, typically kind of in a lump sum in the off season, because he'd go to all of his current seasonals, which he had about 200 sites, and like 80 to 90% of those were full season renters. So he'd go with the contract for next year, collect a $500 deposit from everybody. So you're talking $300,000 plus that he gets in August for the next season. And then he collects the remainder of that seasonal fee, maybe $3,500 throughout the rest of the off season. So coming from the multifamily world, where capital expenditures and projects, you really can't budget for those out of the cash flow of the property. You have to come out of pocket and make a further investment. That's what honestly really sucked me into it, to see that, oh, wow, this is sort of a budgeter's dream. I can take that money. I can set up a debt service reserve. I can set up a capital expense reserve. I can budget for, marketing or certain projects, improvements, what have you, which was really, really interesting to me, kind of a foreign concept. That was one of the dynamics that became very interesting to me.
So that first deal, were you actively looking for an RV park? Were you cold calling, just reaching out to owners?
Yes, that one was also a cold email. The one that I actually closed was from a cold email. They got my email and they said, we're about to sign up with a broker. You better rush down here. So I drove down there in the middle of the winter. So trudged through 3 feet of snow in the mountains to go look at this RV park that was closed. So it required some vision to kind of look past all the dead trees and 3 feet of snow, and it's a spectacular, very unique property. And it really wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for more of like the institutional type campground with like 150, 200 sites. This one's only 50 RV sites and 23 tenting sites. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't exactly what I was looking for, but it was so very unique, and it was a inviting price point at less than $1 million to acquire. So it checked some boxes that I didn't really know that I was looking to check. But then after seeing the property, I was like, I think I can make this work. Let's go for it. And 16 months later now, it's been a fun project, a lot of hard work, but been a rewarding learning experience for sure.
It's awesome. It sounds like a really cool property. Is it on a trout stream?
Yes. Yeah, it is on the Willowemoc Creek, which is famous fly fishing, trout fishing creek in the southwestern side of the Catskill Mountains. So very, very remote property. There's no cell phone service. I mean, it's black bear country. So it's not uncommon to see a black bear on the property. We have like clockwork, a bald eagle flies down the creek in the morning and back in the afternoon. I've been sitting right by the creek, and right in front of me, bald eagle just swoops down and snatches a trout right out of the creek, which is pretty amazing. So that's an added bonus that doesn't show up on the P&L or the investor reporting, that I actually really enjoy going there and spending some time there. So it's a nice added bonus.
Matt, when you first came across the property, I'm curious what kind of due diligence you did on it. I've got to think there's got to be like septic issues, water issues.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that due diligence process that you had to go through.
Yeah. So this one in some ways is actually a little bit easier than other RV parks, because we don't have any sewer hookups at any of the campsites. So another dirty job for you. We've got a honey wagon vacuum trailer that we have to go around and pump out all the black and gray water tanks at each RV, which is, it's a drawback. There's no way around it. We get customers that come in and basically say they'd only rent an RV site that has a sewer hookup, but it hasn't been enough of a drawback to hurt our numbers, hurt our projections or anything. So that's just like one less piece of infrastructure that has to be checked on. We do have septic tanks. So we had septic tanks like for the bathroom and for the house that's on site. We had those inspected, which is really not too much of a lift. You can find the septic inspector, to uncover the lids. And, we were there with them and kind of looked in there, and he taught us about all the different systems and everything. And then really your main infrastructure other than that is electric, which we have sort of approaching obsolete electric service. The standard is to have 50 amp electric service. For the newer RVs that they might have like 2 air conditioners, you really might need that 50 amp. So we have some 20 amp service, which that'll come to fruition once some of our campers leave. Like we have some campers that have some old kind of vintage trailers that they only really need the 20 amp. So that's something that we've been slowly, improving as we need. But a big job. I mean, it's 26 acres, and they didn't lay out the electric in the most efficient way. So we have like miles and miles of electric line, miles and miles of water line. We have all above ground water line, which is not the most desirable from an aesthetic thing. But once you get into the season, the brush grows in, you can't really see the water lines. And it's nice if they break, you don't have to go excavating to find where the break is. You see it spraying up into the air, and you can go fix it for, it's essentially black well pipe that is a pretty inexpensive material. So it could be a $20 fix, if there's a break in the water line.
I'm also curious about the financing aspect of the deal. So talk a little bit about that. Did you buy it outright? Did you finance it? How did the banks view financing for this kind of property?
Yeah, there's really 2 dynamics at play here. The first, and this is changing on a daily basis as more attention comes to this sector, but when I was doing this, still doing it, but when I was closing this deal, we socialized it with some lenders we had relationships with, and we find that lenders have trouble wrapping their heads around this type of asset. And I would say that that's changing daily. There's now very accomplished, well-known brokers that, mortgage brokers that focus in this space. So totally different market than 5 years ago, say. The other aspect here is that with such a mom and pop sector of owners, you're going to come across a lot of campgrounds that might not even have any books at all, or their books are just a total mess. And that's going to be a hurdle with a lender. So we seller financed this property at 70% of the purchase price at pretty good terms. And that's I wouldn't say I've resigned myself to seller financing, but I find a lot of efficiency in doing seller financing because you can negotiate the purchase and negotiate the debt in one shot. And then, you don't have to do the grind of put the deal under contract, negotiate that portion of it, and then go hustle around to lenders or engage a broker. You can kind of turn those 2 pages and move right into due diligence, because as you mentioned, it is usually a marathon of due diligence. There's really not, at least for me, there's no quick closes in this space. I'm usually gunning for 120 days of due diligence, and sometimes that even needs to get extended. So no rushing in that area by any means.
I'm curious if the seller, since they're financing it, did they stay on as well to kind of, for a period of time to show you the ropes and teach you the tricks of the trade at all?
I wish. No, they actually kind of deserted the property 4 days before closing. So they had one of the campers, who was a trusted guy, kind of hold down the fort. We didn't know about that until closing. So we closed the deal, and then I rushed down there to take control of the property. So that was a fun experience. I rented actually a tiny home on wheels. This is a stick built tiny home, 1 bedroom unit on a trailer that I rented. I'd come across a builder of these. So I rented that. We closed in August 2021. So we had the second half of the season to, run the property. So I went down there with my wife, who was somewhat reluctant at that time to go live at a campground. So we lived there for the 3 months, essentially closing that season, ran the place myself, worked to get a manager in place. And now I have a full-time manager there. So I don't need to be so present at the property, which has been a great, kind of a great milestone to get to, because they are management intensive. There's no way around that. The way you get that off your plate is you hire a good, reliable manager, but you've always got to be ready for turnover. You never know when an employee is going to quit. So that's one of the things that you have to be ready to do if you're going to own these and actively operate them. You kind of got to be ready to sit behind the cash register if worst comes to worst, and maybe run that honey wagon and go and pump out those trailers, which I've done a time or a dozen.
I'm also curious, when you're buying this initial one that you bought, was it something that you bought with the idea of, forcing some appreciation through doing some value add work on the property?
Yeah. So the last 16 months or so has been a race to clean the property up. And that being said, this was sort of turned into a little bit of a junkyard. So to date, just on dumpster fees alone, we've spent over $50,000 on roll-off dumpsters, demolishing obsolete structures, cleaning up all the old broken down equipment and tools, and just all kinds of junk, old sections of fence, just like in the woods, just kind of 26 acres of combing through the woods and picking up trash and junk effectively. So that was eye-opening to, see how long that would actually take to get done, because we are in a remote mountain town. So finding labor is a challenge. So it took me about a year to get my reliable crew in place, which is something I certainly underestimated from the start.
What other kind of value add things are you planning on doing? And once that's completed, will you refinance then, and, with the seller, with traditional financing?
Yes. We have found, just through talking to lenders and anecdotally talking to other operators, that it is a lot easier to refinance these properties than to finance an acquisition. So yeah, we have a 5-year loan term, and at really good terms, especially with what the debt markets are doing today. So we're really not in any rush to refinance that. So we've got, another 3.5 years on that loan. And as far as the value add, we're renovating bathroom facilities, painting, all of the outbuildings, the bathhouse, the pump house, sheds, just kind of getting a cleaner, cohesive look, doing a bunch of signage, touring lots of campgrounds. You find that one of the really kind of inexpensive things that grants a really professional feel to these places is just high quality signage. So that's $2,000 to $3,000 of materials, getting the signs printed and manufactured, and then whatever the labor costs to have somebody go, with a post hole digger and put those in the ground. And that's gonna, just that alone is gonna totally change the feel of the property. And that was one of the due diligence items that almost blew up the deal. Was we had this really great spreadsheet that showed all the bookings for all the sites, so we could see exactly what revenue the sites were making on an individual basis, but none of the sites had signs on them. So we just had to take their word for it, which site was which. And we said, no, sorry. Yeah, sorry, but you have to go put signs on all the sites. You have to label all the sites. I was like, I'm not going to buy an apartment building and you have a rent roll, but none of the doors are labeled with unit numbers. Like that's just not going to happen. So sorry. And that they tried to say they weren't going to do it. And we're like, okay, well, we can't buy the property. And of course they went and did it.
I read one of your tweets you wrote. It might have been a podcast. I can't remember, but you said it's just as easy doing a small deal as it is a big deal. So you might as well go big. I've kind of felt that same way with some of the projects I've done, whether it's, doing 2 units or 20 units, you're still hiring a plumber, you're still hiring a drywall guy, it's just scaling it.
For sure.
My co-host Robert doesn't necessarily agree, but talk to us a little about your future plans to scale the business and maybe some of the deals you're looking at right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just because of the nature of the operations, took my foot off the gas a little bit with acquisitions, but luckily had an iron in the fire on a nearby deal that's 3 times the size. So that's going to be a close to $2.4 million acquisition. This one was $850,000. 3 times as many RV sites, 3 times the revenue. So, and it's very close by to the current property. So tons of, economies of scale in terms of operations and staff and sharing equipment. So that's exciting. I mean, that you do find that there's a kind of line in the sand with these deals as to what is going to be interesting to private equity groups or institutional groups. And that's, most investors are hyper focused on what is the exit. Not to say that I'm not, but I tend to look at these properties like they might be forever holds. So yeah, I try to align my interest if I'm taking on partners and or investors and have that conversation that, yeah, we're going to model out a 5-year refinance and a 10-year sale, but this isn't an apartment building. It doesn't have that kind of liquidity, even though there is a frenzy in the market for scooping up these properties. Who really knows what's going to happen in 5-10 years? Are these private equity groups still going to be clamoring for properties? Probably, but at the same time, with the cash flow dynamics, to me, it's, as a relatively young guy, it's interesting to look at potentially holding these properties for a very long time. So, working on acquiring that next deal in the next couple of months. It's been a long marathon of due diligence on that one. And finally wrapping that up in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll move to closing. And that'll be a nice cornerstone of a portfolio in my mind. And I've cut my teeth on the smaller deal and have learned what it takes to operate these properties and just immersed myself in the industry. So I'm definitely of the mind that even the $2.4 million deal is a little on the small side. So once I close that one and wrap my head around that one, I'll be focusing on $5 million plus range to try and be more efficient with my time now that I somewhat know what I'm doing. There's always something to learn, but little bit more confident in the space and what I'm able to handle and take on. So that's kind of my loose minimum target is $5 million purchase price going forward.
So that first deal that you did you do that on your own, and subsequent deals you're looking to bring on partners to help with the financing? Am I saying that right?
So I have done all my deals dating back, well, not the house hack. That was just my personal, and me and my wife. Other than that, the other 30 or so apartments were done with three partners, and convinced them to try out getting into the campground business with me. So they were investors in that deal. And I've been exploring different types of partnerships. I'd say it's kind of a pivotal time for me to select the path going forward, because I have the option of passive investors, which is nice because you become the only decision maker, but you're beholden to them. You become a fiduciary. You have to make the decision that's best for their wallets, essentially. And that's usually not going to turn into a forever hold, because most passive investors are concerned with, I want to get all my capital back in 5 years, and then I want to, I want a nice windfall on top of that in 10 years or 7 years when you sell, which is fine. I mean, we're kind of approaching territory where it's like we've done everything to date, largely dictated on what capital was available to do the deals. To now, we have some people interested to some institutional private equity groups that are looking for operating partners that maybe are, have a very impressive portfolio of commercial real estate, none in RV parks or campgrounds, but they're intrigued by kind of the buzz around the industry. And they're looking to find people who know how to operate them and to throw a serious sum of money at growing a portfolio of these things. So it's kind of a big choice coming up. Do we just continue with passive investors? Do we try and get an institutional relationship? Do we find an entrepreneurial operating partner that shares the vision of growing a portfolio of 5, 10, 15 or more of these? So it's been interesting to network and to meet with people and see what their appetite is and what their vision is, because it's really all over the board.
Yeah. So many, many lifetimes ago, I used to run a off the grid eco retreat center. We had like some micro cabins and campgrounds, campsites, that kind of thing. And I just know from my own experience, it was a ton of work.
Sure.
For actually very little money. It was a nonprofit the way it was structured. But I'm curious, how involved in like the day-to-day operations are you versus how much time you're spending trying to find new deals, trying to find financing, trying to find maybe new partners? It's kind of a balance, I think, between you got to understand the business, learn the business, and be hands-on. But you also, it sounds like you want to continue to grow too. So I'm curious how you're splitting your time.
Yeah, so I'd say for the first 3 months that I was down there, it was 7 days a week, all day, and then close it down for the season, and it tapers off, and it becomes about planning improvements and trying to find contractors. So during the off season, it was an hour or two a day to just try and push projects forward. And then it was time to open up again, and it ramped up to maybe full time for a couple of weeks to get my new manager settled in, who's been fantastic and hopefully is an awesome, long-term partner in operating these things. So now that I'm at that kind of, juncture where I have a really good manager, I'm back to maybe an hour a day of just ownership activities, of paying the bills, planning projects, planning improvements. That is kind of one of the double-edged swords, I'll call it, of investing in campgrounds, is that, you have what you have existing and you want to maximize that. But beyond that, you kind of have a blank canvas. So you can really spin your wheels and just spend all day dreaming up all these creative things you want to do, which can be really fruitful, but can also be a giant waste of time. So that's what I've tried to refocus myself every so often, and not just like daydream about glamping and like what I could do with this. Cause I need to focus on the next deal, and I need to network. So that's what now, and for the last several months, I've been spending most of my time on networking, finding potential new partners, doing due diligence on this new deal, and figuring out, how to best execute that new deal.
I know that you're really into technology. I think you're kind of a techie kind of guy. And I'm just curious how you're using technology to manage your deal flow, your acquisitions, even the management of the property itself. Talk to us a little bit about the role of technology and how you're using it.
Great question. So on the acquisition side, I'm a big proponent, almost kind of an evangelist of HubSpot CRM. I think Salesforce is a great product, but it's expensive and arduous to implement and administer. So I think, HubSpot fills a gap there that is more user-friendly, easier to implement, and is good for all the companies that, aren't large enough or don't have a big enough budget to like employ a full-time Salesforce analyst or administrator. So I've always come back to HubSpot. That is what I do my outreach and through, and database properties, and manage my pipeline of deals. On the operations side, it's been really a lot of trial and error. I've tried a few different platforms over the last 16 months, and it's such a it's such a young industry, especially campground technology, because you have really all these mom and pop owners that are like in their 60s and 70s, and they manage it on a phone, on a hardline phone, and a notebook. That's their technology. People call up to book something, and they write it down in their notebook. So you have all these kind of startups that are trying to become the campground, both the booking platform and the management platform. So we've tried we've tried two now, and I'm about to get onto my third, because what I've found is like one company might really nail the booking side of it, but then it's underwhelming on the management side of it, or vice versa. They're pretty good on the management side, but they're underwhelming on the booking side. So I'm trying to marry those two. And one area that I think will allow us to perhaps exceed our projections is to really dial up the occupancy of especially we have really interesting tent sites, very unique, primitive tent sites that people pay a lot of money relatively. You go to a state campground and it's $22 or $25 a night, and we're getting all day long 3 times that for people to come and pitch their own tent. So the occupancy is not so good, but if we can dial up the occupancy, then there's a gold mine there of primitive tent site income, which is, there's no infrastructure there. There's no repairs and maintenance tied to those. Really just takes a weed whacker and maybe some gravel. So that's an area that I have a high level of focus on, is getting on, like, to steal a short-term rental term, a channel manager, where, it gets you on Airbnb, it gets you on Vrbo, gets you on HipCamp. Because to date, we've kind of just picked one platform and run with it from a booking perspective. But to me, the key is, how do I get on all the platforms? So there's, so many more eyes on our website, on our booking platform, and ultimately more occupancy. So that's a huge initiative right now.
What other kinds of marketing are you doing, like social media type stuff?
Yep. We did a paid social campaign specifically targeting seasonal renters, the full season renters, because that's the really efficient end of this business. You get all that money up front. Like I said, the people maintain and landscape their own sites. It's almost like a triple net lease. They pay their own electric. It's not quite that efficient, but it's nearing that territory. So that we focused on that. But now we just engaged a digital agency to do SEO for us, to do social media retargeting. So if somebody goes to our website or our Facebook page, then they will get tagged and they'll start to get our social media, Facebook and Instagram ads. So that's the avenue we're going. And that's along the lines of, how do we dial up this occupancy? And it was sort of a dance of, we didn't want to over market this thing when it was still not in the greatest presentable aesthetic. As we were cleaning it up, there was dumpsters everywhere. There was construction equipment and contractors going to town. We still did fine, but we were kind of concerned of, are we going to get too many eyes on this thing, and then we're going to get a bunch of 1-star reviews because it's really not ready yet? So now we feel like we're presentable. So let's go invest a bunch of money into SEO, into digital, a whole general digital campaign.
I also wanted to ask you about, it sounds like you're involved in another venture called AcquiVenture. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah. AcquiVenture, like acquisition and venture. AcquiVenture.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about that. What is that, and how's it going?
It's good. It's evolved from a few consulting engagements that I've had that haven't really had like a formal business name attached to them. And it's really burst from what we've been talking about, the acquisition systems and processes, and going direct to seller and just systematizing that. So doing that first for small apartments and then dabbling in the mobile home park space and then campgrounds, it presented itself as a repeatable process, and then it's really asset agnostic. So we are, working with small business investors with, without a real estate component, speaking with an attorney, for example, who is looking to grow through acquiring law firms. So we can go out and build a database of law firms, apply the same systems and processes that we have for real estate, and it's going to generate the same results. So really any real estate sector applies, any small business, any kind of private equity, and really any niche where direct to seller is a suitable road, which I would argue is really any sector, but institutional multifamily, 99% of your deals are going to be brokered, just because that's the way the industry works. Not saying we can't add value there, but we're talking to a lot of self-storage investors, a lot of RV park investors, mobile home park investors, smaller multifamily, and then all the small business sectors, really good application there. So it's end-to-end acquisitions as a service. That means databasing to automating and facilitating outreach to helping the clients manage their pipeline of opportunities to help them shepherd those deals towards closing. So really good fit for lean investment firms that don't have a whole huge acquisitions team to go tackle these things, or really any group that's looking to break into a new niche or a new market where they're kind of standing up a database and a system from zero. We can add a lot of value for them as well.
And again, are you using HubSpot to do that for them?
Yeah, we've become a HubSpot partner in the process, so we can grant some efficiencies and some discounting and some extra resources as a HubSpot partner versus someone just going direct to HubSpot to buy it and then take it upon themselves to implement it and administer it. So I think there's some value there as well.
Makes sense. So it sounds like you spent about 10 years maybe as a W-2 employee. I'm curious if there's anything at all that you miss about those days, and what are some of the challenges of going out on your own as a real estate entrepreneur for someone like kind of thinking about making that jump?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, yeah, there are some days where a salary does become appealing, and that's kind of also ties into the AquaVenture plan and approach, is some sort of recurring revenue that isn't necessarily tied to going out and acquiring assets. So yeah, you nailed it there. Sometimes it is appealing. At other times feels great to set your own schedule and to, I hesitate to say be your own boss, because I've got 73 campsites. So at times I have 73 bosses, and I've got a manager who, she's my employee, but in some ways she's also my boss. And then I've got investors that are also my boss, and I've got lenders that are also my boss. So I think that's kind of a cliche that isn't always accurate. So yeah, it's pros and cons with everything. You just got to try not to fall into the grass is greener kind of mentality. I've definitely fallen victim to that as I've, figured out how to be an entrepreneur and grow a portfolio of properties. So it's a process that is iterative and always changing. So ask me tomorrow, I might have a totally different answer.
Yeah, I think we've all fallen victim to the grass is greener and chasing after the new shiny object syndrome. I wanted to ask a little bit. There's an anonymous account on Twitter. I think his handle is Real Estate God. He's got a program that I think that you may be involved in. I'm just curious your view on real estate courses. For me personally, I haven't done many. I've kind of viewed them as, I don't know, a little scammy maybe, or maybe not worth the time or money. I'm curious, have you done many real estate courses, would you recommend them? What's your experience been like with courses?
Specifically, I would highly recommend the Real Estate Gods course. It's a very affordable price point. I wouldn't think it's a profit center for him. He's engaged in some very profitable deals. I think for the course for him is really a break even. You can do a monthly subscription or you can pay for the year. And he gives you insight into all his deals and covers different concepts. For me, I've been around the block a little bit, so I'm certainly learning from it. But my desire in purchasing that was sort of like get into the community, keep my pencil sharp, read about the things that I'm doing. I'll get some new ideas from it. I think it would be great for beginners. My approach in courses from the early days, I spent a lot of money on Microsoft Excel courses to become really proficient in Excel. I purchased an untold number of books in real estate, textbooks, some really expensive ones. I spent those 10 years, as an employee and as a financial analyst, learning how to be an investor and, getting a taste for different sectors. So that was my approach. I'd say you nailed it with how you described it. Sometimes they do come off as scammy. I think on Twitter, they get a really bad rap. Like it's almost like a bad word to refer to somebody as somebody who like sells a course, which I don't think is totally fair. I mean, there is definitely that aspect, but I would say if you can get a reference, if you can get in touch with somebody who's purchased that course and they say a good thing about it, go ahead. It's not going to be a bad investment, especially if you get some sort of community out of it. I mean, that's invaluable in my mind. So positive experience so far with that one, but I haven't purchased too many other specific real estate courses. I think that actually might be the only one I've purchased.
What are some other books or maybe podcasts that you would recommend to a beginning investor in real estate? Something that's made a big impact on your career?
Sure. So yeah, have tuned into this network of podcasts as of recent. So big fan of this one. Also, early on, I leaned on Joe Fairless's podcast and his book on apartment syndications. It's an entire playbook on how to find deals. Well, first, how to study a market, how to select a market, how to find deals, how to evaluate those deals, how to raise money a little bit. That was a foundation for me as I was launching my business. So I took all his practices and applied that, studying the markets and the demographic data. Also, Hunter Thompson's book on raising capital. It's very similar framework to, being a full playbook like Joe Fairless's book, but specific on the raising capital side. Matt Faircloth. It's one of the bigger pockets books, similar on raising capital. I probably have most of the bigger pockets books. I think bigger pockets kind of gets a bad rap sometimes, but their publishing and their books are really incredible. There was one on renovating properties that when I jumped into that triplex and I was teaching myself how to budget for renovations, I used that framework very closely. Sat down with my wife and said, okay, we want to do the kitchen. We're going to do a new tile floor. We're going to do new countertops. These are the ranges of prices we should expect. And it was very helpful and gave us some confidence in jumping into a renovation project that we had really never done before. So that was great.
Was that the Jay Scott book?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That is a good one.
Yeah.
He's been a guest here a time or two.
Awesome. Yeah. He's incredible.
Yeah. Good stuff. So Matt, before we wrap things up here, we're kind of running out of time here and I want to be sensitive to, you got a busy schedule here. So I've got a couple of quick questions. The first one is, what's the best investment you've ever made? It could be in time, money, energy. And then the second one, what new belief or behavior have you adopted recently that's made a big difference and change in your life? So first one, the best investment.
That's a tough one. So I'm going to have to give like a 1 and a 1A for different reasons. I'd say 1 is the first campground, not for the financial end of it. I mean, that is working out well, but just from jumping into it, learning it by doing, and now I'm a whole lot more confident to go buy a bunch more campgrounds. The other one, which is like totally the wrong way to invest in real estate and not the way you should do it, was a single family primary residence purchase that just totally benefited from the crazy market during COVID, bought the house for 200,000, owned it for a year, did nothing to it, and sold it for $260,000 a year later. And I felt like I was overpaying for it at $200,000, pretty significantly. I being an analyst, I would have pegged it at like 170, 180. Then we threw it on the market, went down to Florida for a week, let the listing agent do her thing. We came back to 15 offers, 12 of them way over asking, no contingencies. We're like, okay, we'll take that one. Obviously we're going to have to pay taxes on that, but was just basically, $40,000 that we found, dumb luck, right time, right place, out of thin air. So can't beat that.
That's awesome. How about a new belief or behavior that you've taken on that's changed or, improved your life?
I'd say that's something I need a little bit more of in my life. I've just closed on a new house that I should be able to settle into for the next 10, 20 years. It's been a little crazy for the last 18 months, relocating cities, sold my house and all my properties in Albany, and then bought an RV at the campground, and been bouncing back and forth as I'm looking for a house in this ridiculous housing market. So bouncing back and forth between my RV at my campground and my in-laws' house. I've been certainly lacking and striving for like routine and getting settled. So like literally this week now I'm settled into the house, and something that has always rewarded me is just going for a nice long walk in the morning. And sometimes I listen to a podcast, but honestly, the most rewarding thing for me is just going for a walk by yourself, no podcast, no headphones, no music. But that's the way you start your day. You're going to do some of your best thinking doing that. You're going to come up with great ideas, strategies. Almost want to bring a little notepad and jot down the ideas, or do like a voice memo on the phone or something as you do that thinking. So that's something I've been making a point to get back into as I get settled with my personal life here.
Yeah, I love that. I think, I don't know if you follow Sahil Bloom, I think is the guy's name. He recommends the same thing. Go for a walk, no podcast, no tech, just your thoughts, and just walk for an hour.
Yep. Love it.
It's good practice. So Matt, this has really been great. I really appreciate your time and, all the insights that you've provided here today. But if you had to kind of give one big takeaway that you'd like our listeners to walk away with today, what would be the one thing you'd want to say to them?
Just jump in and get started. I was definitely one of those paralysis by analysis type people where I made a 10-year career out of learning. And yeah, I made some money. I had a salary. I got paid to do it. But my portfolio would be so much larger today if I had cut that off at 5 years instead of 10 years and just said, let me figure this out. Let me jump in. Let me buy my first property and get that ball rolling, because, it's a little bit of a cliche, but you see it all the time is, the first deal is the hardest. You build all those systems and processes and relationships. The second deal is going to be easier. The third deal is going to be even easier. And then you keep that momentum. You just roll downhill and, keep it going. And before you know it, you're going to have 10, 20, 30 properties. And that's probably the biggest piece of advice I give to people that reach out that are new. It's, figure it out, get started. Even if your first deal is a big loser, you lose all the money you invested, it's probably going to be less than a year of college education, and you're going to learn infinitely more. So just go do it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Great advice. Just get the snowball rolling, right?
For sure. Yeah.
So, all right, Matt, thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it. This is awesome. For our listeners who want to learn more about you or maybe reach out to you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
I'd say probably on Twitter. Big for the last year, been a big proponent of Twitter, which is just an interesting kind of mind-blowing thing, especially in the real estate and small business community. I'd say prior to a year ago, Twitter was kind of a toxic thing in my life as I was just following sports and news. And it's honestly been one of the biggest things in my life since I made that switch. So on Twitter, I'm at iBuyRVParks. Happy to connect with anyone and share my findings and my learnings. You can also email me at Matt, M-A-T-T, at aquaventure.com. That's the root of the word acquisitions and venture, aquaventure.com.
Awesome. Yeah, I concur with Twitter. It's just such a good education. My wife doesn't agree. Like she thinks it's like Facebook or something. I'm like, it's not Facebook. It's like
mine's starting to come around because you see how many meetings I can drum up off of Twitter and how many really impactful people I can meet with. And honestly, I've written maybe 10 mediocre threads over a year and not a whole ton of effort. It's just engagement. And, I'm excited to turn my focus to that and write more content and add more value. And it's such a rewarding and encouraging community. So it's been a blessing and a truly positive experience. So highly recommend that for anyone.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed your threads too. So I'd encourage any listener to go check them out. So
yeah, I appreciate that.
Anyway, Matt, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise, Patrick. Had a lot of fun chatting and excited to tune into the podcast going forward.
Patrick, you've made $1 million mistake too. You just don't know it yet.
Right.
And so is everybody else. The time value of money is important. And that's something that people don't really think about. No competition. If you do something different, nobody's going to do that stuff. Nobody's going to make an option loan. Nobody's going to call the We Buy Houses guy. Do something different.